Think about the strategies you have seen fail. How do they die? Do they come crashing down with a loud noise? Or do they die slowly, quietly smothered by the day job, what you think of as the, quote, real work? Every organization and every team will struggle executing on strategy for exactly the same reason, because of the enormous amount of energy required to maintain the daily operation, also known as the whirlwind. The whirlwind suffocates the activities needed to reach your strategic goals. There are rules for executing in the face of the whirlwind. ChrisMcChesney, the global practice leader of execution for Franklin Covey, has spent the last 12 years perfecting the 4 disciplines of execution. 1. Focusing on the wildly important. 2. Acting on lead measures. 3. Keeping a compelling scoreboard. And 4. Creating a cadence of accountability. Chris, a leadership consultant and executive advisor, co-authored the Wall Street Journal #1 national bestseller, The 4 Disciplines of Execution. In his role developing this execution methodology, Chris has driven change efforts at one of the largest convention hotel chains in the country that resulted in a 50% increase in guest satisfaction within 9 months. At a statewide health and human services agency, the 4 disciplines contributed to a 60% reduction in reoccurrence of child maltreatment. These 4 rules work. Known for his high energy and engaging presentations, Chris has consulted with many of the world's top brands and joins us today to help us get better at executing the ideas that matter most. Let's welcome Chris McChesney.
Leader's ability to focus and execute is never more important than in times of extreme uncertainty, and it's never more difficult than in those times. As change and uncertainty increases, complexity always increases, and execution does not like complexity. The 2 best friends of execution are simplicity and transparency. As complexity increases, it becomes more and more difficult to maintain focus. Now, when it comes to this issue, of the 3,000 leaders that we've worked with over the last 18 years, all of them seem to know the same 2 things. First, we have got to narrow our focus. We hear it all the time. We got to prioritize. Everybody knows this. Everybody says it. And the second thing that everybody seems to know is that I have 20 things that need my immediate attention right now. These things both feel true all the time, and they don't get along. And everybody knows that feeling, right? I'm missing a critical project deadline. The 2 people that were supposed to be hired last month are still in the interview process. I have to report to the GM at the end of the day around those 2 corporate initiatives, and a key KPI just took a nosedive. And in the middle of all of that, what I really know is that the one thing that would actually have the biggest impact on the operation isn't getting my attention. If it's not getting my attention, it's probably not getting anybody else's attention. This frustration happens in normal times. During times of crisis, it can be overwhelming. However, if you can view your plan through the lens of how it'll actually be executed, you can start to remove a lot of unnecessary complexity. Do this. Think about all the major aspects of your current plan or strategy. And what I'm going to have you do is divide those elements into 3 different columns. And by the way, the framework that I'm showing you right now, we have used with over 1,500 organizations. It takes a leader between 20 and 30 minutes to do this, and a whole leadership team can literally do this in under an hour. The first category or column that I want you to start sorting the elements of your strategy into, we call stroke of the pen. These are the elements that require either money or leadership authority to happen. For instance, we're going to change the compensation system. We're going to purchase new machinery. We're going to change an existing procedure. We're going to make a media buy. We're going to hire a new staff member. These things typically have big impact, but they're also things that we have a fair amount of control over. Like, this is going to happen. The next category, on the other side, we call life support. Think day job. This contains all of the critical standards that must be met for you to sustain your current operation. People often call these key performance indicators or KPIs. For instance, what's our customer satisfaction score? What's our project completion percentage? How many new clients have we got this year? Production metrics, revenue numbers. This column is maintained by your existing processes today and by a great deal of firefighting. And the 4 disciplines of execution, we refer to the work that's required to keep this going as the whirlwind. The middle category, that's for your breakthroughs. This is something that you believe is vitally important, but also at great risk of not being achieved. During times of crisis, the achievement of this breakthrough can be necessary for survival. The breakthroughs, which we refer to as wildly important goals or WIGs, usually originate in one of those other two columns, but they can't be achieved in those columns. The breakthroughs can't be achieved with the stroke of a pen. You can't mandate this, and you can't buy this result. Matter of fact, if you could, you probably would. This is also something that cannot be, or at least you don't believe can be or will be achieved with your existing processes. It won't happen unless the organization starts working differently. These almost always require a change in behavior or a change in habit, and usually a high degree of human engagement. To identify a breakthrough, start by asking yourself this question. In your mind, what lives at the intersection of really important, like we can't go another 9 months with this result, that kind of really important, and if I'm honest with myself, I don't think this is going to happen. Not unless we do something very different. Keep in mind that this breakthrough is not always the most important objective. I know this throws people a little bit. Stay with me. It's the most important objective that probably isn't going to happen. For instance, in the airline industry, the most important objective will always be safety, but they're really good at that. They're already doing it, but nothing will ever be more important than that. By definition, breakthroughs require us to close some gap. Also, the center column is a little more resistant to direct management influence. It tends to require more commitment rather than compliance. The wings, right, stroke of the pen, our existing processes, we tend to have a fair amount of control, and compliance actually works pretty good on the wings. These are the kind of results that are going to require the hearts and minds of people. As a matter of fact, think of each of these columns as requiring a different execution treatment. One of the things we started to realize is that leaders can be really good in one of these columns and struggle in another one of these columns. Also, keep in mind that high level or overarching goals, things like revenue growth or EBITDA, profitability or market share, these live above this framework. For instance, if I had the goal of growing revenue, I would almost think of that like the title of a book. The elements that we're dealing with are more like the chapters in that book. Now, in our experience, the greatest frustration and the most complexity is experienced in the conflict between breakthrough and life support. These efforts do not get along. They compete for time, energy, and attention. When people are dealing with something like a global crisis, like we are now, there's a very strong tendency for them to split their energy between two things. First, spending a lot of time, a lot of energy focusing on and conjecturing about things over which we have no control over whatsoever, and bouncing back to maintaining the day job, in a sense, playing defense. And ironically, during these times, when it's most essential to put energy against a critical breakthrough, it's really difficult to get that energy. Here is the critical, brutal insight that we believe is absolutely necessary to understand in order to keep from drowning in complexity. Life support is going to eat up 80% of your organization's energy before you get any traction on a breakthrough requiring a change in human behavior. This is a hard truth because no matter how brilliant or how compelling our breakthrough strategy, in the moment, it will never feel as urgent to everyone as the day job, as life support. No leader gets a pass on this. No leader gets to paint on a blank canvas, right? 80% of that canvas has already been painted on. Quite possibly, the most important strategic question that any leader answers is, how will I spend that 20%? And it doesn't take long to realize that if you choose to spread that 20% out across too many breakthroughs at the same time, you paralyze the organization. As a matter of fact, the 4 disciplines of execution is nothing more than a process for applying that sacred 20% of your energy towards executing on the breakthrough goal. This framework is used by leaders and by leadership teams as a way to start talking about and thinking about executing on your most critical goals while staying out of the complexity trap.